It's very sensitive of you.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. Sorry.
I think we are ready. So,
hello and welcome. My name is Kim. This is my thesis defense for DMI. The title of my thesis is Focusing Outside the Frame, Designing New Methods for Documenting Experience. I started off this year with a question from Joe: what can dynamic media do for photography that photography can't do for itself? And I refined my thesis abstract, which I will read for you now. My thesis focuses on my interest to understand how we document our experiences and what happens when those documents are viewed by an audience. My background in photography and the increase of communication via digital imaging and network photographic devices has led me to research the image as a document of experience. As a photographer, I've noticed that I spend a great deal of time documenting my daily activities with my iPhone. The systems I am using display my images by time, embed geographical data, and allow me to submit my images into larger collections organized by the hashtag. As a designer, I have begun to see images as data, containers of information, and packages for stories and memory that have many access points. In a time when we are drowning in images in the digital and urban landscapes, I am focused on the potential for control or a way to filter our experiences with these images. I seek to discover what makes an experience with images more meaningful. Just as the caption for an image reveals information, I wish to develop experiences in the digital and physical space where dynamic media is used to enrich that documented experience, as well as allow room for interpretation and exploration by the viewer. My case studies are designed to investigate how dynamic media can be used to design systems and platforms for photographs, where audiences are immersed and engaged and invited to participate with photography in new ways. It's important to point out the definition of a photographer from Webster's Dictionary. One who practices photography, especially one who makes a business of taking photographs. But for the purpose of my discussion today, this is how I am defining photographer. Anyone who captures their experiences in the world around them through photographs, no matter which device they choose. Before I dive into some of my research projects, I'm going to take a moment to tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Kim. I grew up in New Jersey and I moved to Boston 3 years ago to attend DMI and continue to work for Apple. I studied animal science at the University of Delaware, where I worked with chickens in a nutrition trial and also raised piglets in a swine production course. I also have a background in photography, almost completely self-taught, focusing on music photography, which was what I picked up as a hobby while I was in Delaware. But I also enjoy documenting experiences in people when they don't notice me or the camera. I feel that the spontaneous moments are more authentic compared to making images that are constructed, much like photographer Henry Cartier-Bresson refers to the camera as an instrument of intuition and spontaneity, the master of the instant. I discovered that with music photography, I was attempting to control this turbulence as a coping mechanism, an escape from the stress in my personal life, and I enjoyed the unpredictable nature of the experience and loved the challenge of controlling it even more. The camera's frame was my window to containing experience, and I view the camera in the same way today, as a tool to investigate, explore, understand, control, filter, and mediate. And I view the photograph as a document of experience. It is our record of our presence, a way to preserve a memory and recall stories of our experience. It is a piece of yourself at any specific moment in time. Diane Arbus alluded to the mystery of photography as a communication medium when she says, "A photograph is a secret about a secret." The viewer is able to fill in the blanks. My uncle is a photographer and thought of the photograph as a blank canvas, one in which he could build and others could build a narrative from and take away stories of their own. Viewers have a unique way of connecting the dots, interpreting and taking away a story or a message as it relates to them. Both the experience of capturing and viewing images is a mediated experience. There is information hidden in photographs. My research encompasses using dynamic media as a tool for designing methods for control and participation that will ultimately affect our experience and relationship with photography today. So before I step into some heavy-duty material, I'm going to take you on a quick detour about my process. So the structure of my case studies was actually borrowed from my background in science, where I was very familiar with the lab report. These are the core sections of the lab report. And each case study is prefaced by an early investigation or inspiration point. I like to do writing by hand first, through Post-it notes on buses and trains, equipped with 2 small notebooks. Now I'm going to touch upon a few points of photography that led up to my case studies and some of the people whose work I was observing in the field. A photographer named Chase Jarvis was a great source of inspiration and ideas for me. At a time when I was relatively new to digital photography, I got to participate in one of his photo meetup groups in New York City. He gave everyone a 16-gigabyte flash card and told them to go out and fill it up and come back and show you what you got. I looked at my image counter on my digital camera and thought, well, there must be something wrong here. It says 4.2K. And I went up to him and I was like, what does this mean? What's wrong with the image counter? And he said, oh, that's 4,200 images. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that you could take that many pictures on this small little device. And the thought of having that many images was a little nerve-wracking, which I'll come back to in a little bit. But more importantly, Chase was interested in this phenomenon of the camera phone and why people were so hooked. There was a shift about to happen, specifically around the time the iPhone was released. More people now had the ability to capture and view images, and photography was no longer this exclusive thing with a secret club that it once started out as. It was becoming ubiquitous. Inspired by the community using their iPhone to make images, Chase curated an exhibit at the Ace Hotel in New York City called Dasein. Dasein is the term referred to as raw human existence, being there. And the snapshot is the physical form. The snapshot is closer to the moment, yet fleeting and temporary. And just like the snapshot, the platform, the space in the gallery, was shaped to that experience of the snapshot. The public would submit images through the project site, and Chase would choose his favorites every morning and print and hang them on the walls. You had to visit the gallery every day to see the images, but the project site, a Tumblr page, displayed all the images that people were uploading. And these were hundreds of thousands from all over the world. Dasein was an example of a dynamic collection of images that crossed between the digital and physical space. And as camera technology became more accessible with the iPhone and the media to record images, like that flash card, came in higher capacities, more and more images were being captured and shared. How do I start to handle these collections of images that are so big? A designer and computer scientist, Jonathan Harris, was creating work that explored the relationship between humans and technology. In 2007, he embarked on an experimental photo documentary called The Whale Hunt. In The Whale Hunt, he was doing all the work of documenting, capturing images every 5 minutes. Instead of presenting over 4,000 images for us to click through, he created a richer experience through interaction and exploration. We are able to follow his journey living with a family of Eskimos in Barrow, Alaska during their traditional will. And he recognized patterns in the documentation, data, keywords, tags, and used those to create constraints for us to choose from and use as lenses for the story. So the more filters I select in his interface, the narrower my viewing experience becomes. I decide which path I take to explore the documentation, making the story that much more digestible. The story is in our hands, and it becomes a narrative through control and discovery. This method of combining data with imagery in order to enrich the documented experience sparked the beginning of my thesis research. So now I'm going to walk you through my 3 case studies. My first observation was citizen journalism through Instagram, and I used this to inform my first case study. I started questioning how I was accessing photos through social media platform Instagram, and I was fascinated by how these collections told stories of major news events, like Occupy Gezi in Istanbul, and later the protests in Kiev, Ukraine. I used a site that allows you to create algorithms, if this then that, to create recipes, to pull the images with the hashtags Occupy Gezi and Euromated from Instagram into a Tumblr page. The images are displayed by time in an infinite scroll on your web browser, and you also have the option to view in a grid format like this. I was looking at photojournalist photos mixed in with images that were captured or circulated by citizens. Instagram became a platform where both images existed and told a more dynamic story. And I realized that the hashtag is this way I can get to this content, a way to filter. It's a piece of data. And what other data can I use to filter large collections of images? What would be valuable to the experience of viewing the photograph through data? So my first case study is titled Beyond the Image Sensor. So my objective was to develop physical and digital interfaces that could provide users with new ways to control and filter large collections of photos. I created a framework for an application for a mobile device, along with an idea for a system for a physical interface. Using 2 forms of new and unique data, I intended for my viewers to have more context for the experience in the photographs. I was curious to find ways to record personal data and additional information that digital cameras were not currently recording. And I posed the following questions. Can data be used to focus the attention of our audience, giving them a tool to control their experience with large collections of images in the digital space? And how can personal data attached to an image affect the viewing experience? And last, what experiences can we design that take into account both sides of photography, capture and view? I made a list of all the things that I could record as I captured images. The first I chose to record heart rate as I photographed a concert. So I used the Runkeeper application on my iPhone and a wearable heart rate monitor to capture this data. I built a physical prototype for the images and coinciding heart rate data, and thought about how a user may choose to sort the images by time, or choose a point on the graph to reveal images related to that specific heart rate. The second piece of data I chose to investigate was elevation. My Aunt Susie, who hikes all over the world, shared her struggle with remembering where along her climb that she captured an image. So I took my camera out to my neighborhood and went for a hike between Alston and Brookline. And I was tracking my elevation through the Runkeeper app. When I returned with over 150 images, I was trying to sort through, well, how would I want to be able to organize these or be able to parse through them or see them a different way? Here's just a small sample of that set. So I sketched out how a mobile application may look with all this data, using my aunt's example. An interface that you can scroll left and right, pinch to zoom, and tap on images to reveal metadata. So what I found from this case study was that from the perspective of a designer, the end user experience should be the focus. How is the information being used? Who is it for? And what is the goal of putting this information in the hands of the user? What do you want them to get out of it? The data that is captured and combined with images gives us an opportunity to begin designing better systems for viewing and engaging with images. The experience captured in the photograph is brought to life with personal data, and the system for viewing images must be designed and shaped to the documented experience or the content of the images. This would ultimately give us a powerful method to tell stories with our images and allow a viewer to connect with them and have more context for the experience documented. My next case study was inspired by the geocache. Now, geocaching is an outdoor activity where participants will use a GPS receiver or a mobile device along with an application to find these objects or these containers in the wild. If we think about geocaching as a system, we realize that it's almost completely maintained by its participants. A cache is created by a user who decides the content, how to present it, and where to store it. This inspiration through discovery also continued at Mass Milka's installation in a place called the Octagon Room, which was a physical installation of this room that you could walk through, rifle through drawers and cabinets, and it invited users to go through all this stuff in the space. I wanted to see if I could get everyone to open this one box on the desk. There's this dead bird inside. I wanted to have them to have the same excitement I had finding something. And inspired by the sense of discovery in these experiences, I questioned whether I could give that to someone with photography. So my next case study is called the Photo Cache. And Photo Cache is a mobile application for capturing, viewing, and sharing photographs in a physical space. This application prompts users to seek out hidden photo collections and encourages them to explore their surroundings. The application is built to be used on public transportation, in this instance, more specifically a train. Using the smartphone, my goal was to provide an experience that would spark a connection between two strangers, pull myself and others out of the digital space of their iPhones and into the physical space of the train. I focused on creating a system with two functions. The first, to connect strangers using the document of experience, the image, which was a universal medium for communication. The second was to develop a dynamic record of the space through user-generated content, kind of like a time capsule for the train. The application would use the technology already built into the iPhone called iBeacon. Apple is using this in their retail stores. For example, if you walk up to a table or a wall of accessories with fitness accessories, you would be sent a notification with information about the products there. I sketched out the workflow of the app and created a storyline to imagine how the experience would start, branch off, and end. And then I moved on to creating screens inside of a web prototyping tool called Fluid UI. And finally, a video abstract for how the application would work.
This is Geron. Geron uses trains and buses regularly to get around Boston and the surrounding neighborhoods. Most of the time, it's a routine, mundane task. She uses her phone to distract or pass the time in getting from place to place. As Geron boards the train and settles into a seat, she gets a notification on her iPhone. Curious, she taps through and sees a collection of photos, all taken from that particular spot on the train. There is a beacon at her location on the train, the source of the photo collection. Geron taps on one photo in the gallery to take a closer look. Who took it, when, and a map of the location of the train when the photo was captured. Are there more beacons with photos? Geron moves to another part of the train. She discovers a beacon through another notification. There are no photos attached this time. Geron taps the camera icon to open up the iPhone's camera. She snaps a photo of the scene passing by outside her window. Happy with the photo, she moves on to some simple editing, adds a caption, and submits the image to the collection. Geron later views the photo in the gallery and taps to reveal the location data automatically attached.
So in wrapping up this project, I realized that this was an example of how to experience photography both in the digital landscape and with others. The mobile app allows users to participate with images in new ways, one in which they are invited to explore the place around them, document their time there, and seek out images of others that have been in that place prior. Today, as the quantity of images increases, I feel that the value of the image is diminished. PhotoCache attempts to restore that value of the image in conveying the experience, telling a unique story, and creating a deeper, more personal connection between photographer, viewer, and a shared space. The image is used as the point of contact, a way to create that connection, and start it up. In the middle of the semester, and also my final case study, I had the chance to go to New York City for some inspiration from a French photographer and graffiti artist named JR. He installed this piece at the New York City Ballet called Eye of the Beholder. The piece was created with photographs captured by HD cameras of dancers clad in white and folded into white paper. The photographs were printed directly onto the floor of the theater lobby. As I watched, I realized that viewers were completely engaged and transformed the space into something dynamic. Just their presence put them into the photograph. An environment was created almost effortlessly. And as viewers became participants, they were much a part of the work as the work itself. As they walked through and lay down with these lifelike ballerinas on the floor, and captured photos of the piece, often including themselves with the images. While this can't be defined as dynamic media, I consider it a platform to create a dynamic experience for viewers, as they're able to interact differently with photographs than if they were in a gallery on a wall. This was one of the first times I truly felt immersed in photography. But I questioned, was printing photos on the floor to create a space the only way to immerse us in images? And I returned to Boston to continue work on the Mosh Cyclorama, my final case study. The Mosh Cyclorama is an immersive physical installation, a platform for images from crowds, where the viewer can experience the chaotic nature of a mosh pit. In the experience, the viewer is able to interact with the images with the ability to control the speed at which the images are displayed on the screen. A mosh pit naturally creates a circular space where people move quickly around the edges, leaving an opening in the center. The center of the space is calm and at rest, yet as we move closer to the edge, we are pulled in and along with the movement of the people. From my experience in music photography, I was able to observe that media really typically focuses on images of the artists, but I believe that documenting the crowd is just as important and valuable. There is so much energy and a pulse that lives inside of the crowd, and it's difficult to capture and make tangible for someone outside of this experience. In the Mosh Cyclorama, I call attention to this point of view of a concert. At the time I was working on this project, a friend shared some work by Dan Witz being shown at Jonathan Levine in New York City. His hyper-realistic, large-scale paintings of mosh pits. New York Hardcore was a series of paintings inspired by his past experience playing in hardcore bands in the 80s, and painting the experience was a kind of catharsis for him. And I also remembered Jeremy Shaw's piece earlier in the year at Mass Mocha called The Best Minds. It was a video projection on two facing screens of a mosh pit in slow motion meant to exaggerate the movements of those in the crowd. While these are all really interesting representations of a mosh pit, really the best way to describe this is that it's like a tornado. See it here. So I started sketching how the experience might look and where the controls would be. I then built a physical model with images sourced from Flickr, and then tested with projection onto a shower curtain in the DMI studio. And once I had the space for the install, both the Bacalar Gallery and CyberArts, I worked out the dimensions and placement for the projectors for each. There was a lot of math in this project, and I'm not a fan of math, so it was a big learning curve. There was also a heavy cost for fabrication and 3 projectors, so I launched an Indiegogo campaign to crowdfund. And while only 15% funded, I was still able to use the funds to purchase a second projector, and also learned how to present the idea to a wider audience in the process. Capturing the content presented its own set of challenges. I looked at calendars at the biggest and brightest venues I knew of, and I set up to shoot it 2 nights. The first was in Philadelphia at the electric factory here by a friend named Tom, who's also a photographer and videographer. The second was by myself in Boston at the House of Blues. The same artist, Flogging Molly, an Irish folk punk band, was playing both of these nights. And while we have permission to photograph, photographers are typically only able to shoot the band for the first 3 songs and not permitted into the crowd. So unfortunately, security forced my friend in Philadelphia to leave because his equipment raised concern for safety in the crowd. So I realized after that the camera had to be discreet and disappear. So I chose the GoPro as opposed to a DSLR camera. Attached to a chest mount and hidden under a t-shirt with a hole cut out for the lens. And some black tape covering any lights, because I wanted to make sure that nobody saw this. No one in the crowd, none of the security guards that are in the crowd with you. So I was very specific about making sure that this thing was totally hidden. And the resulting images were chaotic. Sometimes I could make out human forms in them, and sometimes not, where it was just a blur of colors. And other images were really abstract, with these bursts of light or shadows and silhouettes. And there were about 1,000 images captured in the hour and a half I was in the crowd. And I sorted through and created an image sequence in Adobe Premiere. But I had a lot of hard time choosing which images to use because I'm so used to curating images that are very clean and focused and super composed, and these were just a mess. But then Daniel reminded me that it was more of what best represents and Cindy during this whole process, because I'm not that familiar with the Connect, communicating with open frameworks, or processing, which is where we started first. I installed a single panel rear projected for Fresh Media and Cyber Arts Gallery. And at this stage, it was a single user experience. I realized here that for the interaction to work as it was intended, it needed more space. So as you move closer to the screen, the video would speed up, and as you move closer away towards the center to simulate that experience of that mosh pit, you needed more space to do it. And based on the necessary technology and the software, and also the nature of the space in the Bachlar Gallery, my original idea for the installation as a 360-degree projection shifted to a 2-wall projection. And in some cases, I observed that users stood still in the and multiple users would also try to affect the interaction. And in other cases, like Cindy and Sophie, who knew how to interact with the piece and knew how it worked. And from watching how people interacted, there were a few things that I had to work out, like the distance where the speed switched, when you got too close to the wall and the camera lost you at that point, and then paused the video, and then the jitter that sort of happened between the speeds. Luz Maceo was a fantastic tip.
Drums up. Flat them. Step one leg.
It's faster if it goes to the edge, right?
Yeah, so it'll move in, it'll get faster when you move in.
Move in.
There it goes. Now, no, then it doesn't see you anymore, it stops.
Oh, the edge is not the
Yeah.
edge.
Alright, so go a little bit more. This step. There we go, now hands. Oh, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Good boy.
That's even the thing you do. That's
Running Man.
the thing you do.
Whoa, that's really good. Wow.
So the tools we use for documentation have allowed us to capture experiences that were once challenging. And one example would be surf photography. The technology available today gives us many possibilities for documentation from multiple points of view. And I'm always captivated seeing these images, but I also question the platforms that I view them with. Can my cyclorama be modified to fit surf photography? Turned on its side like a tunnel that you walk through, engaging a viewer in the experience of riding a 10-foot wave and being rolled into the barrel of the breaks. So now we have these better tools to document the space of a mosh pit, and there is more depth to communicating the experience with this additional documentation. Images capturing the crowd convey this energy of the human spirit in relationship to music. By removing the photograph from its traditional 2D space, the experience in the image comes to life, and the photograph begins to create a space within a space, where the frame is the window to the experience, and this world where others can escape to. This new platform aims to restore the authenticity of the experience document, creating an immersive experience for a photograph with interaction allows a viewer to be guided back to the event and invited to participate. So from all this work, I came to some conclusions. In the experience of dynamic media, Jan says, images are one means of representing information, yet logic, not imagery, communicates the true intention. Therefore, when a viewer interacts with an image, they are processing information in visual form. Each viewer connects with the information in a photograph, be it through memory or experience, taking away what is meaningful to them. Dynamic media allows us to tap into this connection and provide an additional layer of information, context, and adds new access points for the viewer. Documentary photographer Mike McLaughlin says he uses the camera as a tool for accessing the human experience. And as I define a photograph as a documented experience, I believe that dynamic media is the key to unlocking and enriching the experience in a photograph. Today, with camera technology easily accessible to almost everyone, photography has become a popular visual language, and images are a significant part of our culture of communication. However, photography has evolved into a commodity, and images are ubiquitous, perishable, and as a result, have lost their value. Restoring the value into photographs is central to my work. Through my case studies, I explore a series of methods for adding value to photographs and enriching the experience of photography, both for the photographer and the viewer. Beyond the Image Sensor illustrates the power of combining data relative to the experience in photographs. Data allows the photographer to tell a more compelling story by inviting viewers to participate in the experience. Viewers are empowered to explore collections of photographs in new ways. And PhotoCache focuses on the photograph as a point of contact for communication. It proposes a system where we can use images to form meaningful connections in the digital space. Through a participatory experience in a shared physical space, users exchange photographs of personal experience, memories, or stories. And finally, the Mosh Cyclorama imagines a new way to view photography in a physical space, one that is immersive, participatory, and experienced from a unique perspective. Users are given a new entry point to the documentation, as well as a way to control how the images are displayed. With my research conducted through the lens of dynamic media, I now have a new approach and understanding of photography as a communication medium. My goal is to discover more ways to use new media as a tool for pushing content forward to capture viewers. To accomplish this, I began designing systems in the digital and physical space that invite users to participate and ultimately take control over how they access and process images. When curating experiences for my audience in the future, I will look to tools and platforms that encourage my users to explore, investigate, and provide a means to add value to their photographs. Dynamic media systems adapt to its users and the stories that they are trying to tell. By bringing photography and dynamic media closer together, we can create new opportunities to share and tell stories through photographs. Photography's next pivotal moment will be framed by both photographers, photography professionals, and designers. There is an opportunity for both communities to shape how we use this communication medium. And through collaboration, embracing new technology, and integrating dynamic systems, we can engage our audiences in completely new ways, restore the value back into the image, and push photography in new directions. So what are my next steps? So I presented PhotoCache to a company in Boston called One Mighty Roar to get some more feedback, and I'm waiting to hear back about that. And I'm working on setting up my Mosh Cyclorama to work for multiple users. I got a lot of feedback from the MFA Thesis Show opening, as well as the gallery talk that we had on Saturday. There was a lot of questions surrounding, the multiple user piece. Does something happen if it's a different type of music? Is it a different capture device that I'm going to use if it's a different type of music? I also received some prompts about something on the floor to kind of guide users into the space and give them a hint of like what to do. The biggest question was about adding sound, which I'd love to do with subsonic sounds, which I'm really obsessed with. This recording of the music through only the subwoofer. It's this vibration that happens in the room. You don't hear the music, you hear more of just the vibration and the tone. And I would love to test that out and see how that works. And then I'm also working to kind of pitch the project to GoPro. GoPro just launched a section called GoPro Music, where they encourage musicians with all these different accessories to mount the camera to mic stands and the end of guitars, just to give someone more perspective of that experience. And I'd love to get more cameras to document with, wearing it front to back for that 360-degree capture. And Aperture just announced the release of a book called Words Not Spent Today by Smaller Images Tomorrow. It's by David Lee Strauss, and he explores photography's changing role as a tool of evidence and conscience as we move into post-photographic era. So I'm really excited to check this out. Aperture just released their latest issue, which was a big part of my contextual research. It's called Documentary Expanded. And I just want to say thank you, especially to Daniel, Dennis, and Fred and Cindy. You've been like super patient and really, really helpful through this entire process, as well as everyone in the DMI family and my family and friends.
Thanks for the presentation. That was great. I think one of the strengths is there's so much original photographic content in here that played a large role in like, keeping, I think, things engaged. In terms of that's sort of a big topic, trying to get at what makes for an immersive experience and interactivity with sort of traditional forms of communication. These are tough things to have been attempted by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I guess in some of the experiments I was, and I'd seen present, I think,
last
semester. So some of this might be repetition on some of the earlier projects, but I think this was another case of the prototyping, not some of the early work like the heart rate. It's hard to draw conclusions from that. It's hard to look at that material and see, how did something like heart rate affect somebody's mapping heart rate to these images? Did it really change the way people perceive the work? It's relegated to at least in how we observed it here. It's theoretical, and we kind of are left imagining what that might be. I saw looked like there was some kind of a paper prototype involved.
Where you slide it back.
Right. And there was no, again, I've been looking for, what kind of feedback did you get from that? Were your assumptions, like you made choices about heart rate and elevation, now were those good choices, were they bad choices? Did they, how did that affect the experience relative to other kinds of factors? So those are things that would be, to the extent that you can include that when you're presenting, would be helpful. In a similar vein, the Mosh Cyclorama, I guess part of what I was struggling with was something that kind of felt like arbitrary choices around like the relative distance to the wall, that affecting the speed of the footage, and how did that choice, was that a good choice? Did it, were you able to compare that to other other sort of forms of triggers and other ways of, did those choices, were they in service of the original goal of trying to get people to experience this very physical, dimensional experience? So those are things that I'm left sort of wondering.
I need that decision based on the fact that of the original experience and keeping with that on how the original experience operates.
The distance, so that the closer you
are to the screen, the faster it moves in the experience. It's calm in the center, and then chaotic on the outsides.
What kind of reaction did people understand that relationship? Did they experience something akin to what you've experienced? Was it successful in that way?
It's kind of it was difficult for them to, and I think based on that, you're walking at this very hard edge wall. I don't know if that had something to do with it too, or just the fact that I didn't give those instructions at a time they weren't anywhere in space.
Yeah, I was most encouraged. I really like photo cache and the Mosh cyclorama, and was really encouraged by what you described as a reflection on what you would do next cyclorama. Because I think Daniel was absolutely right. That an image like this is not an accurate document of that kind of an experience. One that has more abstract expressionism, qualities where you can't really make out the image, but you make out motion. It's a better document, more accurate document. And I think that was in the process you were describing, starting to translate into the role of space and the role of motion. I think it's super unfortunate that there was a 90-degree angle in the corner of that space. That in some of the earlier prototypes that you mocked up, it was an edgeless wall, which I think made a huge difference. There are things that you find out yourself that you might do next time, like providing a little bit better affordances so that people know what to do, relax and do more. They're the triggers of the interaction. Just in general, to back up to the beginning, I thought you did a really great job of paralleling your personal journey, as well as the massive changes going on in the field. But the issues that you highlighted as the ones you're sensitive to, the relationship between professionalism and amateurism, the relationship between overabundance and value, I think that those were spot on the right things. And I liked, for a thesis that's about documentation, it better be well documented. And it was, I really liked seeing your work in progress. I liked seeing the ingenuity of where you were prototyping, the little big prototypes with the masks, the camera, you rigged up, all really great stuff. A couple of specific questions on photo cache. It's also, I really liked the way you documented that with the video abstract. I think qualities of storytelling that run through this whole thing are really, really strong. Can you say more about how successful you think it was in meeting your stated intent of getting people out of their phones and into more of a social and presence experience in this space? I think that's good.
So I think that I have to do some more user testing with that to get more information, to see, I want to take the Fluid UI interface, there's a way to export it and actually put it onto the phone and test it out more completely. That's the point where I want to go a little bit further with that.
I wonder, excellent presentation, I really want to work, and it's nice to see the full evolution of your work over the years. So it's wonderful to see one thing I thought that you could take from your earlier piece with the paper prototype is, what if that heart rate data or that more emotionally quantified data somehow affects the image in a way that makes it more energetic and more, you know just by looking at it on the wall now that there's a sequence of images that was where it was really intense, because that's where drummer's heart rate really went up, you know, or something like that. If there's a way to map the data and the visual effect that's put on the photography, the photo document experience, maybe that's a way to bring some of your previous work on the way to the more cyclorama forward into future work. So, makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you, Tim. Dropbox. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think that's it. No, it's
I did get a chance to.
Yeah.
I guess. It gets to 45 seconds and the drums keep going, but nothing else changes. I don't want to go. Yeah, exactly. Almost finished it. It ends here. Like somebody, Brendan doesn't want to take the last part. So in fact, you know, so it's like,
I got your PDFs.
No, not at all.
yeah.
maybe I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's make it official. It's a pleasure to congratulate you on completing all the requirements to receive MFA design. Two minutes break.
Your presentation yet?
Yes. I am. It's actually this guy. You ever been? That should be a free. Yeah.
Okay.
Before I begin, I was able to hand out books to most of you. I brought little moleskin books for everyone that came today. So if you didn't get one, there's some over on the table in a little pine box. There's also some buttons in there. Those are kind of maybe commemorative artifacts of today's events.
I think we are ready for this.
So my name is Fish McGill, and today is my third and final year at DMI. This is my thesis defense, 3-year part-time student. I'm an instructor at the School of Museum of Fine Arts and in the Artward Bound program at MassArt. I'd like to show you some of my work. So the title of my thesis is Play, Process, and Reciprocity in Dynamic Media Experiences. So you'll notice there's a series of characters that may pop up in this story. They each have different meaning, but they each kind of represent something in that title. The top character, kind of modeled after me, you received a book, there's a phrase, evolve, devolve, transmogrify. That's the path that we all go on when we learn something new. And I'd like to show you my path of learning while I've been here at DMI. And each of these characters beneath him represent different aspects of my thesis. The dog represents play, the monkey represents process, and the bird represents reciprocity. So if you're seeing these symbols, that's where they come from. And they're lifted from a story called Momotaro, about a boy that was born from a peach that kind of grows up to be a hero. So I'd like to read you my abstract. I believe drawing is a fundamental design process, one that promotes lucid visual thinking and helps to turn thoughts into achievable goals. I create combines, or new media, paired with drawing, as a visual communication tool to teach the creative process to the participants at their own pace. When I learn a new creative process, I go through a 3-part metamorphosis that all learners endure. At the outset, I evolve to a point where I want to create a problem to solve by learning a new skill set. In the middle, I churn through the new medium and experience the often undiscussed progression phase, where I devolve and get worse as I learn. The final phase requires a leap of faith to move forward. I transmogrify my skills to produce something unexpected and expand my self-efficacy. This journey of efficacy begins with play, a visual dialogue of doing and making, watching others in action. The goal of my work is to craft tools for the participants to glean insight into a new process of working, grasp information presented in a new manner, chronicle their personal processes along the way, and achieve a form of reciprocity, or give and take with the project. Now, reciprocity is my word for interaction. I believe that to be truly interactive, both entities get something out of the experience. So the piece itself is rewarded with your participation, and you leave the piece with a new understanding or new experience. To me, that's what interactive is. It's a reciprocal experience, or reciprocity. And evolve, devolve, transmogrify is the journey that we go on as learners. So this is printed on your books. And what I am suggesting by giving you these books, they're all blank books, that you kind of mirror my practice going forward. I have a strong practice rooted in drawing. And I encourage you, as you're watching me today, use this book. Jot down visuals that come to your mind, and use it going forward. So, a bit of an intro. I came to Dynamic Media Institute after spending 8 years working professionally And one of the best things I ever did was I joined a crew of other artists. This is a group of artists that all had a diverse range of talents, all kind of hinged around graffiti and street art. And we would do live mural events around the city. And this is a picture from us doing an event for the 5th anniversary of Bodega. So each person brought something different to the group. The group is called Project SF, and modeled after Super Friends, where everyone brings something different. Also, prior to coming to DMI, I worked in the game industry, and that was a really exciting experience to collaborate in a technological way. And one of my roles was to kind of sum up projects in an instant, and I had lots of opportunities to do that, and I'm really grateful for my time at Harmonix. This is a piece for the Rock Band Network series that I made, where it shows how you can evolve by using a set of tools that we created to design your own tracks to play in Rock Band. One of the main reasons I came back to school was having a wife that's a photographer and an educator, and seeing her experience getting her master's, and how that really just opened up so many opportunities for her personally and growth as an artist. And I said, I want to do that too. I want to match your skills, and I want to live up to her talents too. And it's also really convenient having someone that understands the creative process that has your back. So big shout out to Cheryl. So one of my first really kind of inklings of interactivity with my art was this model I created called the Robot Guts Project. And the way it works is I create a system for people to work inside. I create this giant robot and present a prompt. And I ask the people coming to participate, what is inside of a robot? Robot guts is the answer. And guts is an acronym for gears, utensils, tools, and stuff. So all of the people that come are invited to participate through drawing. And their answer could be something as weird as calculator parts, or maybe different pistons, or maybe a computer. But in the end, it creates this kind of larger scale project that I couldn't achieve on my own. And I found that really exciting. But I wondered, is there a way to translate this into something more dynamic? And what I love about Robot Guts is that everyone takes something away with them. So in the end, the installation is everyone gets a piece of the robot. And it was really exciting to see it in other people's hands. They made it, they felt ownership of it, and they can do whatever they please with it from there going forward. You could chop it up, it could end up as a beer pong table, it could be hanging in a gallery wall, who knows? So why DMI? So I came to the realization by spending every waking and dreaming moment of making large-scale projects of my own, and wanting to turn those into something different. And it all kind of came together one December afternoon on my honeymoon with my wife. We entered inside this chapel in Traigny, France, which is just south of Paris. It's a small village. It's on the Tour de France, so it has some traffic. And I realized as I was coming into this chapel, I was thinking about what it was like before the chapel existed, or before the town existed that I was entering. And it was much more farmscapes. So coming into this chapel was a transformative experience for everyone, because it was so vastly different from the world around them. And I felt like there was something being communicated to me from these frescoes. I felt like they were calling me to create something that could potentially pull other people in through drawing, but I didn't know what that was. But I knew I had to kind of take this call and follow it. I needed to answer the call that was being presented to me. So as I've worked here, and if anyone is interested, I've brought copies of the books. I've made a daily appointment to sit down and draw, and I encourage everyone to take this up as well. I use these books, and I just sit down and make sure to make something each day, and it's led to a whole range of projects that you'll see in my case studies. But this daily appointment has served me really well, and I encourage other people to do it too. And to me, I believe that drawing is a method of thinking in visuals. It's not a litmus test for your creativity. It's a way for you to work ideas out and conceptualize before jumping into a particular material. I feel like we're all transmedia artists at this point, but drawing is still this really powerful tool for kind of refining your ideas and making them into achievable goals. So I'd like to show you some slides from this talk by Suni Brown and kind of explain them to you that really hit home why drawing is so terrific. So people who draw, when exposed to verbal information, retain 29% more of that information than their non-drawing counterparts. So if you're drawing right now while I'm talking, that's awesome. This will be sinking in deeper. And I encourage you to do that in meetings, with friends, whatever. It makes a big difference. We think drawing is something you do when you lose focus, but in reality it's a preemptive measure to stop you from losing focus. Drawing has a profound effect on creative problem solving and deep information processing. There are 4 ways learners intake information so they can make decisions. They are visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. In order for us to chew on information and really do something with it, we have to engage in at least 2 of those modalities, or engage with one of those modalities coupled with an emotional experience. The incredible contribution of drawing is that it engages all 4 learning modalities simultaneously with the possibility of an emotional experience. So you get a lot with a little. That's my point. And it's portable. So they did anthropological research, they being Sylvia Fine in First Drawings, into the unfolding of artistic activity in children. And they found that across space and time, all children exhibit the same visual logic as they learn and grow. In other words, they have shared growing visual complexity that happens in a predictable order. This suggests that drawing is native to us and an instinct many of us actively deny/avoid. So it's still hardwired in you and you can tap into it. It's kind of this Ferris wheel or carousel that you can just jump back on at any point in your life. It's not something that grows stagnant. So this practice of working every day to me came from reading about one of my favorite people, Jerry Seinfeld. Now he also has a practice of transcendental meditation coupled with his writing, which I think affects his creative process, but he developed this notion of a chain, which I got addicted to. Here are Jerry's words. After a few days, you'll have a chain. This is a few days of working consecutively. Just keep at it and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job next is to not break the chain. So I'm really excited because I've been here for 3 years and now I have this 3-year tome of books to kind of go with my thesis book that anybody is welcome to go grab while I'm talking. But I think it's a really powerful thing that anybody can do. So this is a quick excerpt of a few, this is a couple years worth of books, just some snippets. So the ability to communicate visually is a skill I believe we're born with. In Drawing with the Right Side of the Brain, Betty Edwards describes a shift phase when the learner begins to compare herself and her work to other people's drawing. This is a natural and normal thing to do. Why do we listen to that comparison clanging in the brain as anything valid? Because it sucks to suck. When you know that you're terrible, there are a few things that feel worse. You have to endure it. You have to tame that voice, lulling you away from work towards something safe that you know how to do. So I'd like to run you through some contextual research of examples of the 3 kind of pillars of my project work. So play is how to begin for me. I'd like to talk about a few examples of people that really influenced my personal theories on play. This is Dr. Stuart Brown. In Brown's book, Play, he notes how animals will calibrate their play with each other with a single goal of keep on playing for hours on end. If you go to any dog park, you'll witness how large dogs will tread lightly around smaller, aggressive dogs as they run and run and run through an enclosed area. Children scaffold complex adventure stories with their toys for hours, sometimes alone, keeping the excitement moving by adding plot twists and introducing other characters into the mix. So play is all about keeping the project going. Perpetual forward motion with one goal in mind, exploration. In Century of the Child, an exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art that opened a few years ago, I found a ton of very influential projects that influenced my work. In particular, the avant-garde artist's creation of toys. Here's a little bit about that. By opening themselves up to the children's perceptual worlds, avant-garde designers set out to create innovative forms of toys to stimulate youthful energy and imagination, and possibly shape the society of the future. So my work is deeply influenced by the philosophy behind their tour-making work, as well as other examples in the rich exhibition. Interaction demands we reach out, grab hold of the object, the interface, the controller, etc., and let it launch us into a state of play. Today, Christoph Niemann translates his drawings into interactive, playful experiences exceptionally well. Niemann is renowned for his ability to create engaging cartoons using simple objects around him. His drawings appear as if he is merely playing, having fun with toys and basic drawing tools. Sophisticated thinking behind his work is undeniable. His abstract Sunday blog for the New York Times has been illustrated in a range of materials, including cookie dough, Legos, folded paper, candy, office supplies, and more. These are some stills from his petting zoo application, which are more interactive explorations based on his drawings. In Aaron Malter's book, Designing for Emotion, he talks a lot about the personality of the project itself. We often think of personas that we're designing for, but not the personas we're designing of. A lot of my work thinks about the personas of the project before it begins. Walter says the personality of the project influences how to execute decisions going forward that fit within the project persona. This is a helpful methodology I gleaned from observing the work and research in Designing for Emotion. Walter goes through a number of his own personal projects, focusing on his large example of MailChimp. The humorous personality of Freddie von Chimpenheimer is pervasive across MailChimp, injecting the experience with a mix of expert tips for using the software, goofy links to monkey-related videos, or relevant how-to articles, how to pull a task at hand. Process is the collision of techniques together to forge new ways of working. The following examples get to the point of what I'm referring to. In David Hockney's Secret Knowledge, he does research on how Renaissance painting was influenced by discovery of technologies like camera obscura. I find this insight on the visual process behind painting masterpieces fascinating. I remember the dreaded accusations from classmates in elementary school of being a tracer. Hockney's work turns the tracer accusation on its head. Here we see a picture of a camera obscura in action. We have the subject outside of this room with a small hole, and she's being projected upside down, which is the way that your eye sees, onto the canvas that the artist is beginning the painting on. Hockney's research helps expand how we redefine drawing. He moves away from the technical, draw what you can see craft, and expands it into the skilled use of technology to augment the creative process and enable the artist to see further. Secret Knowledge adds connection between painting, drawing, photography, and illustrates the importance of mixing media and influences. So I believe this is an essential element of creating dynamic media today, having dynamic media build upon the work that we make. Another example is graphic facilitation, which is the process of one or more people visually addressing a topic or problem to a group, and getting to the matter of what we're trying to achieve through visuals in group formation. DIY.org is an online platform where young people ages 4 and up can learn how to do just about anything worth bragging about to their friends. And what really sets DIY apart is their documentation of the projects. They're all thoroughly covered and created by a network of kids from around the country. I think that's a really exciting area where process is being implemented and shared. Last, I'd like to touch upon reciprocity, some of my research. So reciprocity is my definition of interaction. The participant and the system both benefit from engagement. Pee-wee's Playhouse is one of my earliest memories of defining an interactive experience. The show eggs on participation by encouraging viewers to scream the word of the day, sing along with some weird song, or answer a question that's posed. The notion of an invitation, a call and response, is a welcoming quality that I'm also after with my projects. Cloud Kids' work, who are based in Boston, is a prime example of learning as a side effect. So there's no heavy-handed approach to how the curricular content is presented. Learning is fluidly integrated into the storyline. Play is encouraged through lighthearted, keep-going approach to games. and the games are extensively play tested with children in the Boston area. Lastly, I'd like to talk about Creative Confidence by the Kelly brothers of IDEO. So their book begins by talking about Albert Bandura's work on achieving self-efficacy, which he begins by working with patients who are trying to overcome a crippling fear through a process of guided mastery, taking slow steps towards facing that fear. And one of the side effects of facing your fears is that your ability to take on other challenges is enhanced. Your self-efficacy is expanded. So I'd like to jump into some case studies. Prototyping is designing interactive experiences with toys. Filling in the gaps with imagination, viewers are referencing their experiences of playing as they watch the films being portrayed. So my first foray into prototyping came around making a project around my interest in exploring history by redrawing it. I created a series of loops, or stories that began and ended in the same place, and I worked in multiples. And I presented these to classmates with the idea of creating some kind of experience around them. And it was inspired by the prompt from Professor Brian Lucid, "The end is where we start." I narrowed into a historical redrawing of some different scenes from the history of Boston. These drawings were refined, and I began thinking about different ways to interact with them. I thought about ways that they could be spun around on a podium. Or what about one of those old-fashioned tugging towel things? Brian stood one of my books up on the table and said, well, what if this was just standing upright and people could kind of interact with it? I thought about building these out, running over to Home Depot. It seemed simple. Just buy a bunch of sheetrock and some wood and get to it. But then reality sunk in, and I said, I only have a week to do this, so what could I do instead? And I reached for a Chewbacca toy that was on my desk. And I said, well, let's get small. Why don't we try that? So I designed these experiences as very small versions of what I had in mind. And I plucked out 3 of them. The first was this spinning version, kind of like a magazine rack, followed by a large spinning wheel that people could kind of spin at their own pace, kind of mounted to the wall, and a large, more immersive experience. And I decided to make some videos showing what this would be like for people to interact with.
Now this piece was different because both of us got to view it at once. Tell me what it was like to look at it with me.
Well, at first it was great. We both, we'd never seen the piece before, so it was a new experience for both of us. And I thought as far as the craftsmanship went, it was well constructed, it was smooth, and we were able to gracefully spin the work around the dowel. Up until there was a part where I wanted to look at it a little more closely. Just spinning it. And I guess I could have communicated better with you, but it was really difficult because I wanted to see my work. Didn't want to look at it more. Spinning it.
Right, and I was going the other way.
Yeah, you started reversing the direction. And I like things to be concise and in order.
So with prototyping, I stumbled upon this way of visualizing a project and clearly stating what I have in mind with that work. Prototyping became kind of a tried and true method for me to come back to say, here's the project that I have in mind, here are the players that are involved, what is it like for them to interact with each other? And the feedback that I received indicated to me that people were seeing themselves in the project, because for one, they were laughing, and another, they were saying, I could see how this would fit in this kind of application. So it was this way that I kind of stumbled upon out of this is what's around me, and also the influence of some of my research from things like the MoMA exhibit, Century for the Child. Next project I'd like to talk about is the pen point of view. Pen point of view is an intermingled drawing documentation tool. So a pen point of view is inspired by process films that I've seen throughout my life of artists at work, which include Jean-Michel Basquiat's biopic, as well as documentary where it seems like he's just kind of pouring paintings and drawings out of his body. You just can't get them out fast enough. Keith Haring filling a room until he's completely cornered by his drawing. This is a still from when he was at School of Visual Arts. What strikes me about these process films is they're absent from the final work itself. We don't have access to this material once the work is complete. And that is where dynamic media comes in for me. Why can't we hold on to this in another way? I think there's a real appetite for the process of how a piece of work is put together, just as much as the work itself. This is an example of Jackson Pollock in a film created by the MoMA, where he's painting on a panel of glass. And you can really see it's not just dumping paint onto a canvas. Essentially, that is how he makes his strip paintings. There's a lot of consideration and thought that goes into the process. The real kind of epiphany that I had came from watching a film about Chuck Close. Chuck Close is a realistic painter who suffered an injury at a point in, I think it was his 40s, where he was suddenly wheelchair bound. His upper body still works, and he redesigned how he works to kind of accommodate his new lifestyle of being in a wheelchair. And what was fascinating about this film was that they attached a surgical camera to his brush. And I was going along for a ride watching the drawing and painting come together. And I said, well, this is something that I want to do as well. For me, when I'm creating a mural, essentially what I love about doing that is that other people are involved in the process too. They can see the work come together. They can get that experience that I have when I'm in my sketchbook. It's just on a larger scale, so more people can be involved. This is a shot from creating a piece at the ICA for a live event with the group I'm part of. And that's something that I love about these events, that other people can see the process of it coming together. And I want to kind of create a more portable way to do that. So with pen point of view, it's a simple setup. It's a close focus camera attached to a pen. This video is sped up to get across the point of what I'm after with it. The camera is attached to the pen, and as the film is recording, there are these checkpoints that come in on the right-hand side. So you can see where you're at in terms of how the drawing is progressing. And I have a term for this kind of footage that I've coined called macro data. This is the data that's lost in the creative process, the data of the whole piece coming together. So macro being close focus, combined with data. So this could be a way for people to analyze how a drawing is made depending on the instructor or the artist. It's a way to document process in an integrated way that's uninterrupted. Because that's such a drag about making a work. You have to pause, you have to stop. This is fluid. There's no interruption. So the term that I'm coining for this is macro data. This idea of close focus data of the work itself that you can pause, rewind, speed up at your own pace, and record as you're working. So the pen point of view offers integrated documentation of the work as it comes together. And I see this having different applications for teaching and analyzing how to create a work. The next project I'd like to talk about is the Drawn Impulse project, which was a project that I made with my classmates, Stephanie Dudzik and Jeremy Sherman. So the Drawn Impulse project came out of this idea of creating an experience in drawing that could kind of encourage impulsive behavior. That was our initial idea for the piece. So we began by standing side by side, doing some paper testing, and just drawing next to each other to see what would happen. What we noticed is that we were influencing each other quietly. And after we made a series of drawings, we brought them over to the window, and we noticed that there were overlaps between them. We found that layering process to be a visually inviting unexpected feature that we chose to pursue as the next round of testing. I presented the layering test to my classmates Saul, Kim, Professor Brian Lucid, and we asked them to draw for a few minutes, and then we would add another layer, and they would build up their drawing as time went by. So what I noticed was that some people, like Brian, for instance, was thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead. He was thinking about how to build it up. Others, like Kim, were building the story as they go. And then Saul, he was kind of inventing different stories for each layer as he worked. There was a lot of variability in how people approached it. But in the end, we enjoyed this layered process of seeing the drawings kind of build up and come together. Meanwhile, while this was going on, the Boston Marathon in 2013 occurred. And I was sitting at home, grateful that we chose not to go to the finish line. But like everyone else, I was glued to the television set. And I couldn't help but draw the scenes that I saw kind of unfolding in the coverage. And it was a really effective way to kind of deal with and process those events. And I said, well, there's something here. There's something that I'm responding to. Maybe this could be incorporated into the project as well. This idea of, this is a prompt that I'm responding to. Let's explore that. So I presented this idea to my classmate Kim, who was working just outside of the finish line at the Apple Store on that day. And she took all these amazing photographs. And like anyone who would be in that situation, was having a difficult time wrestling with it all. And I suggested to Kim, why don't we just my classmate John Howery presented the notion that yes, you have a prompt, but that's a very emotional attachment that you have to it. So why don't you present something that is more, neutral and see what happens? So we repeated the test with Saul and my wife Cheryl with an Ansel Adams photograph and asked them to trace it. And it still had a striking result. But we landed on this idea of prompts being a really important way to get started with this work. So we created a set of 3 prompts for testers to work with when we made our software experience of this. We wanted this to be a digital experience. We wanted it to be a black and white experience, something that people could respond to on the screen in a drawing tablet-based experience. The 3 prompts we created, the first were visual, second was visual and text-based, last was the text-based prompt, which is borrowed from Seinfeld. There's another Seinfeld reference in this presentation. So this is footage from some of the testers. So you can see here that we are able to save all of the decisions that they've made with their drawings and repeat them on a loop. And what kind of happens here is there's storytelling going on. People are responding to these prompts, and imagery is coming forward, and you cannot help but see the storytelling that people are just inventing on the fly. For instance, in the top left, that's one of Azim's drawings. He's drawing this crashing wave on a boat. And then next to it, I believe that's another Azim drawing, where he was drawing his dinner that he had just had. And then the skull shape, another Azim work. Azim was one of our best testers for this project. The middle group, you can see, received no instruction on how to use the software. And I thought it was really interesting to see, wow, they really took liberties here. The first picture on the left, in the middle, the dinner prompt, they completely erased the dinner prompt. And they created their own world with bridges to connect the different kind of floating land elements. But then they still kind of did a similar reaction as the other testers did. So I leave these on a loop, and I've watched watched them ad nauseum, and I just had this really fun experience of seeing the stories come together. This idea of layering over time and taking advantage of the digital nature of working with dynamic media. This layering process that is just completely fluid and uninterrupted with the drawing that they are making. So it's a bit of a spin-off from the pen point of view. It's building up the work, and we're able to save all of their work to create a time-based version of it in the end. So the drawn impulse really hit on this idea of give people some kind of prompts to work with. So here are some comments from the testers. The prompts were more like Rorschach experiments than a place to start for me, Team says. They're open to interpretation, depending on who the user is. Most artists get inspired by things around them. They look for patterns, and I approached it that way. Without the prompts, I would have drawn dinosaurs. I do that a lot in my spare time. This is a fine artist sculpture MFA student. The prompts were definitely helpful. Without the prompt, I would have zoned out, and I don't really draw in my personal practice. The what's for dinner prompt was the easiest to get started with, but less fun than the mysterious one about the sea. This is Lily and Hart. Kim Maroon says, the visual prompt got me thinking about what to draw instead of having to come up with a starting point. It was a good frame to put me in and focus the ideas I had. It gave me some inspiration on where to start. And last, Judy Haverhill gave this comment. There's something about this project that reminds me of how karaoke gets people who normally do not sing to get up on stage and sing. This project is great fun, and responding to something is so much easier than confronting a blank void. Avoid the void, you know? This is what I'm after with my work. I want people to feel comfortable approaching a system and willing to draw. To me, drawing is a willingness. And I feel like I was able to hit on that with Drawn Impulse, with Jeremy and Stephanie's help. We were able to create a system that was inviting with these prompts to get people going. There's low pressure, easy kind of barrier to entry once you understand how the tablet works if you've never used it before. And people are able to make these really exciting drawings that we were later to turn into time-based works. So the last piece I'd like to talk about is up at the gallery now, which there's still time to see this week if you haven't seen it yet. It's called Germed. Germed is a participatory service announcement on germs. And I'd like to walk you through how this project evolved. So in my daily drawings last fall, as an about to be a new dad, I was suddenly hyper-aware of germs, and I started just drawing them, and I couldn't stop. I created this whole series of 30 germs that just kept going, they kept coming, and I wasn't sure where they were heading, but they were also kind of raising my awareness about germ encounters in the wild. So I'd like to walk you through a few of those that I noticed. There's the guy in the stall repurposing public space. Phone rings in the bathroom stall next to me. I stand at the sink, shaving after my daily swim. The real loud marimba ringtone mixed with the vert noise of the iPhone fills the air. Is he going to answer that in there? I hope before I finish my thought I hear, hello, this is Jim. No, this is a great time to talk. Conversation continues amidst flush after flush from the neighboring urinals. How can this person on the other end not hear this? Is this just an accepted part of life now? When did these toilet stalls become phone booths? Why does Jim not care? So I was seeing these things more and more. As I became more aware of germs through drawing them and just enjoying the process of making my own germs, I kept seeing different situations like Jim in the stall. I started remembering coworkers that would bring their iPads into the stalls, or seeing people eat their lunch over their keyboards and seeing things spill into the desk. Like, what is going on? We're not thinking about these really important topics. And I too am guilty of it. I bring my phone in the bathroom and I sometimes read in there. I'm trying to do it less. So all this was happening before my son was born. And now that he's here, I'm the person that's in charge of output. So I'm washing my hands all the time. So I'm starting with the man in the bathroom mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been made any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. So I said, there has to be some kind of project here. So I wanted to take my experience of drawing germs as a way to think about them, my way of participating in the facts about germs that I came across, and create that as a platform for other people to use. So I created a series of simplified masks that could potentially be used for people to fill in their own germs as a starting point in their drawings. So I'd like to thank publicly the Fresh Media curators for putting on 2 awesome shows, because this pushed the project to new heights, and I really enjoyed being part of the whole show. So thank you, curators, thank you, fellow artists, and thank you to Proximity Lab for making it happen as well. So the first show at the Cyber Arts Gallery, we presented the project. I created this very sterile-looking experience for people to come up to and draw a germ and press a simple germ-shaped button, and then the drawing would be inserted into this pool of germs swimming around. The interface was very simple, almost too simple. People would come up and make their germs, press the button, and walk away. During the crowded opening, I noticed that the germ project was getting a lot of attention and people were using it. Some people would take it apart, pick up the germ, kind of use the button in ways I didn't expect. Others didn't quite understand how it worked, but many people just instantly understood it and really got a kick out of seeing their germ in the system. When we brought the piece to Nave, one of my really trusted mentors, Annie Silverman, pointed out to me that this is extremely confusing for her. I provide very little instruction beyond the button that you press and the marker that you use. So I said, well, maybe there needs to be some kind of middle ground to reach to help people understand how to use the system. But meanwhile, I was showing it to other people, and some had no issues with it. They just instantly got it. They came up to the podium and got right to work. Especially kids. Kids just understood, if they made one and it didn't work, I'll make another. I'll just keep trying. So I was really encouraged by that participation that I was seeing. When I presented Germ in the gallery, I thought that we needed to add something to this to address the issues that users were having. So I created these 4 germs in the corners, modeled after my own germs, to give people a model of what to aim for. And I created a series of blank germs that are kind of washing over or underneath the germs that are in the pool to give it a bit more texture. So the result in the gallery, just by making some small modifications with some software refactoring from Saul and Brian, it really produced a lot of germ drawings. It produced over 2,000 drawings while it's been in the gallery show downstairs. So I saw a big jump in participation from just a few small tweaks. Adding these small germs in the corners gave people an indication of what was going to happen, and it drew people in. And it was a model for them. I don't know what to make. We could make something like this. So I could see more participation. And with just some simple, hey, draw in here, guidelines, that also kind of sped up the process. So by putting it in front of people, that's what really pushed the project along further. But the core experience that I was after, drawing the germs to raise your awareness of them, was being achieved. This is an excerpt from some of the now 3,000 germ drawings. You can see some people are using germ in ways I wouldn't expect, taking photographs of stickers. The sound artist Ubik showed up and photographed one of their pieces. There's people writing shout-outs to their friends, some people drawing cartoon characters. These are all germs that I wouldn't have thought to make, and seeing the player content was a really exciting experience. It was this is what I'm after kind of experience of creating a system that invites participation with low barriers for entry that people can get started and get to work. So I feel like Germ was this successful combination of the things that I was after, and also came out of my personal practice as a drawer and designer. I feel like it's taking my way of working and creating it into a way for other people to learn from. So, in conclusion, now what? So, it's to turn the way that I work into a way for other people to learn from. And I've had these amazing experiences of teaching, kind of happening in parallel, of creating experiences for others to use. And I see that there's so much overlap between the two of those experiences. My projects are tools for the participants to glean insight into new processes of working, grasp information presented in a new manner, chronicle their personal process along the way, and achieve a form of reciprocity or give and take with their projects. 3 years of research, testing, experimentation, and personal growth led me to this point. I came to the program as a visually oriented person, rendering my experiences through drawing. Learning how to use dynamic media to research my ideas required me to collide different methods of visual communication together into new types of work. I see that as I came into the program, I viewed drawing as a way for me to make sense of the world around me. My project work here explores how drawing can be a way for others to make sense of the world too. Drawing is my native language, and I've built on that vocabulary with my projects to gain a deeper understanding of how to design for information in the pen point of view, design for time and motion and drawn impulse, and design for interaction in terms. I believe the proper foundation for any project, large or small, begins with the exploratory process of drawing as a form of visual thinking, and I claim that as my area. I predict others will create exciting new processes that will grow out of the creative niche they claim as their own. I look forward to sharing my experiences using drawing as my personal starting point for creating work with future students and collaborators. I see this as a rich territory to explore, and I hope to work with you in the near future. So in my future, I look forward to growing as an educator. While here at DMI, I've taught at the ICA, the SMFA, and Mass Art, and I enjoy working with the 14 to 24-year-old crowd. My time spent as an artist in residence at Montserrat, visiting lecture at AIB, has been a great insight into working with young artists as they start to form their own creative praxis. I imagine working on a team of talented, diverse sets of people on projects that will be helpful and interesting for everyone involved. I enjoy imagining what it's like to work at a fascinating firm like IDEO, an energetic place like CloudKid. Living and working in Boston is important to me. I want to continue giving back to the community here. I once heard a Bentley professor, Aaron Nurek, describe the ideal future designer as being T-shaped. T implies a broad range of skills, accompanied by deep experience. And I aim to fit those T qualifications and use those to help other people and projects as I can with my talents as a drawer, designer, and an educator. So, just to return to training before we finish, the epiphany that I had from simply viewing frescoes really got me started on this role. So let's just have a brief conversation to wrap this up with the fresco. Was I able to achieve what the frescoes did for me? I was able to create an experience of prototyping using toys to kind of articulate my ideas about a project. I was able to develop an integrated process documentation tool with the pen point of view to kind of analyze your practice after creating a work and use that as a way for others to learn. I landed on this notion of having a prompt for a digital experience to get people started, which we developed in the Drawn Impulse. And lastly, with Germ, I created an experience that is immersive and participatory that invites people to take this weird experience of me drawing germs and turn it in a way for them to also think about germs, create a mindfulness in the experience of using the piece. I'd just like to thank everyone who has supported me with amazing generosity and innumerable acts of kindness over the last 3 years of mirth and learning in this program. I really enjoyed my time here, and thank you for the time today to present my body of work.
Thanks a lot, Fish. That was really beautiful, engaging, and this is a book I would like to steal. Thanks for the littler books that we get to take home with us. You clearly have a lot of creative confidence, especially when it comes to drawing. And I think in a way, that's an obstacle to you. I had to go. I was super psyched with the robot guts, just as a sort of intro to the kinds of things where you were coming from. It was, you created great artifacts, you created great process, and your attitude, the openness to the reusability, and its generosity and spirit behind it is all awesome. But then when you went into your contextual research, I kind of lost the plot a little bit, and I went back and I checked your abstract, and you came around to it back at the end, which was to say, turn the way I work into approaches for others to do the same. But your creative confidence, I think, makes it hard for you to put it in simpler terms. I think your thesis is kind of solving for the fact that it sucks to suck. And you don't suck. So I would have liked to see your contextual research be less about other people with great facility and more about people who are terrified by empty pages. So I think the first two projects were super charming. I mean, the prototyping brought a lot to life. Anytime you're reminding me of Michel Gondry, you're doing awesome things. But I felt like it was about your practice, not about the gap between your practice and people who know that they suck and are terrified of big pages. But I feel like you picked up a ton of momentum. The last two projects really felt more interactive, more dynamic, better evaluated with the people that they're intended for, less about you and the things that you do well, more about other people and the things that they do badly. So the ways that you set up in Drawn Impulse, some ways for people to get started, that felt to me like a direct, so you're designing, creating tools for these 3 stages that you go through. That felt like a very, very direct and effective solving for the terror of getting started. And then things got even better, I think, with Germ, you were creating an environment that, looking back to the robot guts, somehow in a social environment, something doesn't matter if everybody's kind of in the same boat. So it was just fun, and it was easier for people, and it got phenomenal results just in terms of quantity. Because I think that's the way people go through that middle step of the process, is to just build up familiarity with what they're doing, comfort with. Even naive or rough drawings can be perfect for what they're intended. And I love seeing the work that people were coming out with at the end. I feel like you just ran out of time. That there were some aspects of kind of incompleteness, or that your insights about how to translate what you do really well to make it more available to other people came to you. You had this process that was more personally investigative. And then you jumped into more like, who's this really for?
So as far as an obstacle, I do feel, yeah, helping people overcome just themselves is what I'm after. This voice in your head that tells you at a certain age, you're not good at drawing, so stop. Whereas we're hardwired to be able to do it. And I think we're able to express miles further than with words and pictures. And I feel like I was getting closer to that with Germ. I was seeing people that I know personally that will say things like, I couldn't draw to save my life. But they were coming up to Germ, and they're making these really weird things that I couldn't have predicted from them. So by designing that experience, this idea of creating an experience to facilitate that self-efficacy in someone, even if it's just like a small approach, I feel like, well, I reached a few people with that piece. And that was an exciting, really rewarding experience that I want more of. I don't know what you call that, but I want it.
Thanks for your presentation. I was blown away. I think some of the things that strike me, you got this really ideal about the power of drawing that is very lofty, but that you sort of delivered on. One of the pieces that kind of struck me in that way is the friend that was at the marathon bombing, where you sort of found a way to share in the drawing process with her as a therapeutic device. And that's sort of the thread that I saw in sort of all the work. I agree that it sort of progressed to be more participatory over time, but to me that's sort of an evolution of the work that you're doing. But I love your frame, the way that you sort of talk about your work, and the very you use the word generous to sort of describe others, but it's very present in your own approach. That there's a very sort of community-minded aspect to how you talk about this, and it's just very it's really refreshing, the sort of humility that you sort of that exists in the way you talk about your work, and there's no sense of I'm over here, other people are over here. It's a very I guess community-minded approach to trying to help people through whatever sort of difficulties they're having. It's really great to sort of observe that. I also think there's you hit on a few things that are really interesting to me personally too, around sort of shared controls, like creation of systems where you get to experience some of the joy of the unknown, not really knowing the unpredictability, or not really knowing what's going to be produced, and how the contributions of others are going to be influenced by you, by the people around them, and that willingness to sort of share authorship in those systems, I think is going to be really rewarding. I think you got to experience some of that in the work you did. I love your definition. I love the framing of reciprocity. I think that's a great. It's a good reminder for all of us involved in this kind of work that it's very easy to think about interactive systems as this box where it doesn't really change, and we have this sort of interaction with it. But the idea that we are just as responsible for contributing content and making an impact to the body of work as we are in sort of receiving something out of the interaction, I think is great framing. Congratulations, really amazing work.
Thank you. It's like I do believe that building other people up is a skill that I really value more than touting. I know I'm really good at drawing. Like I know, like having gone through this program, oh, I can draw. When I step back and I look at these books, it's like when I'm in it, it's like you're starting the first time every time. Like I want people to know that feeling doesn't go away, but you need to be built up. And I've had really generous people in this program and in my life get me to that point. And I want to continue helping people feel that too, but also I want more experiences like this, making projects like this.
Can I say?
I'm really, really happy that I came inside a presentation by accident, because as you know, I've been working with sketchbooks all semester long, and I found it really powerful that you could get people out of the sketchbook realm and into creating things together, because my focus was more on like private. And I thought it was really cool, the monster guts, for you to be able to contribute like this giant thing and be able to take it home and use it as an inspiration after that. But I just really was blown away by your presentation, and I really wish I had come in brain a little bit more. I just am really in love with it.
Thank you.
Project.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that so much of the focus here because of time, and the goal is your thesis defense, so you have to focus on the work. But the generosity thing, I think, hits it on the nail on the head there. Where like the second time I met Fish ever, he asked me to teach a class with him at the ISA for no other reason than you said it would be a cool way to get to know you. And in the way that have seen in the past, like for Fresh Media, when you get everyone together to do the screen printing or to create a mural, it's contagious, your love for it and your curiosity. And so to just sort of see that from the side, it's like if you can figure out a way to continue to take what you can create in those moments and put them in your projects, then they're going to be really amazing.
Thank you. Right.
I know that you started this process, and you have a lot of this. There's another set of tools that I'd love to see you develop, which of course is curriculum. Right? Now you're moving into a realm where you're teaching more and more about this kind of thing. And you're going to continue to do that. I'd love to see you start developing curriculum for doing this, for teaching this, and sharing that. I mean, you can really be seen as a leader in this area. And many programs need and so I'd love for you to sort of continue to think about how the ways in which you teach and the structures in which you teach can be packaged into a way for them to share.
I'm drawing in, so you all have backgrounds studying this stuff extensively, but the rest of the world may not be thinking about it as much. So I'm addressing everyone here as a reminder, but also people outside this group too. I want them to feel comfortable not being scared for their life to draw. Like, it's just this really handy tool that is wired in us. Let's find more ways to help people do that, especially in digital experiences. That's a whole area to explore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I managed to stay in box.
Good.
Two of them were and the other one was experience. And I never used it. And I also never used his camera. Yeah. I'm not even that good at my eyes. And then I go through anything.
Yeah, it was neither.
It was not I hope it's not in Las Vegas.
No.
Or protesting against it.
No, I don't think it's.
Feng Shui. Start over.
You might be flying.
No, wait.
At least you want to hear out of Do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, is it my Hi, Jeff.
What? Is it San Francisco?
Jeff.
Okay. I thought they were ignoring you.
Oh, I forgot.
San Francisco.
What? Wait, what are we doing? Oh, serious.
May I have your attention, please? Chris. Great pleasure to congratulate you on concluding all the requirements for MFA. Okay, so let's begin. Sophie, it's all yours.
First of all, thank you guys all for staying until 4. It's been a really fun day, and I'm proud to be concluding it with all of you guys. All right. My name is Sophie, and my defense of my 2 books, different thing, is called Reproduction in Dynamic Media Society. And I'm going to start with a story. A story that begins on this pier. Before DMI, I was a painter on this very pier in Red Hook, Brooklyn. The pier housed a couple of large warehouses filled with artists. And during my time there, an old college roommate introduced me to the work of a fellow pier artist, Ubik. The anonymous sound artist and I became quick friends. I found his ideas of interest, and his work has become integral to my investigation here at DMI. Ubik, dubbed the Robin Hood of sound, is known for his sound performances, soundings in which he illegally takes control of existing public sound infrastructures to play the iconic noises of our new personal technologies. He is most famous for his work as Apple Bomber. His first attack happened in December 2010 during the Christmas rush at Boston's Boylston Street Apple retail store. Through unknown measures, he was able to gain control of the store's speaker system for 15 seconds and play the Apple ringtone Sherwood Forest 3 times in a row. At the time, the event was met with security concerns, but over the years, these soundings have found themselves in the good graces of the public. He has proven himself to be a globetrotter with soundings in major cities including New York, Berlin, and Paris. It is generally considered good luck to be present during one of his soundings. Another piece includes an intervention during the Black Friday shopping rush.
Live from Center City of Philadelphia, this is Fox 29 News at 5.
For most, it's known as the busiest shopping day of the year, but those braving the crowds in the city of brotherly love were in for an artistic surprise.
The anonymous sound artist gained control of Walmart's existing sound system and played the Apple ringtone Anticipate to disrupt the Black Friday commotion.
These concerts are a commentary on the absurdity of our intimacy with mobile devices, especially the Apple iPhone. By using Apple retail stores as his performance venue, Ubik subverts and undercuts Apple as a corporation, as well as their almost religious fervency for its products. However, by removing these intrusive beeps and nagging alerts from our pockets and purses, and shifting their scale to a monolithic broadcast tone, the spontaneous soundings offer viewers a rare chance to hear the sounds of these devices in a different context, one that interrupts the group at large and entices individuals to be silent, to listen together. It is Ubik's intention that the soundings empower the audience and remind them of their own agency and how they choose to hear and interpret these sounds, either as the functions these ringtones imply or as pure form with the potential for beauty. When I got to the Dynamic Media Institute, Ubik soundings were ringing in my ears. And since then, I've been trying to understand exactly how our personal dynamic technologies, from laptops and smartphones to email and social media accounts, shape our perceptions of the world. I was influenced by Walter Benjamin's 1936 essay, The Work of Art in the Age of its Technological Reproducibility. In the essay, he looks at the impact of new reproductive technologies on the role and meaning of a work of art in society. Specifically, he contextualizes his thesis in terms of Karl Marx's model of the base and superstructure. Okay, our purposes, this is very superficial. I'm not a Marx expert. But according to Marx, the base is our economic system, inclusive of all forces and technologies of production. And it is the base that determines the superstructure. The superstructure refers to the dominant ideologies, which manifest as cultural rituals and political powers in society. So changes in the technologies of production, like those brought about by our digitized interactions, can cause structural changes that manifest in all areas of culture. In my thesis, Marx's superstructure, represented by Benjamin with the work of art, parallels what I call value, an abstract ideological undercurrent influenced by our technologies of production. So, I've developed a framework to illustrate how distinct types of production in society create different types of commodities, and these commodities are manifestations of distinct types of value. So, in a free market industrial society, there is a dynamic relationship between the capabilities of production and consumer demand. This relationship drives economic value of a material commodity. During World War II in the US, there was a shift in the production techniques into a post-industrial society. At this point, the economy underwent a transition from the production of goods to the provision of services. Along with this transition came a shift in the construction of how we measure value. The result is that it costs less to make a Coke than it does to advertise Coca-Cola, the brand. Meaning the worth of a Coke is no longer determined by just its production costs, but also by its cultural value. In our new dynamic media society, the nature of these commodities and services we use changes again. And my thesis considers the digitized interaction as a commodity. I want to take a moment to define the digitized interaction, the push of a digital button as a commodity. So on one hand, dynamic media society offers us a host of new types of goods and services which we can consume. You're all familiar with dynamic platforms for entertainment, lifestyle, education, business. Yet these services offer a different type of commodity as well, a commodity created by the interactions on their interfaces. Consider Facebook. Through its interface, it is transformed into a digital department store of sorts, providing a range of clickable commodities to share, to like, to upload, all accompanied with their unique forms of metadata. So, as consumers, it isn't that we click to consume the resulting information. Rather, by clicking on a link or trigger, we are consuming that particular button or intended digitized function, fulfilling its designed or consumable destiny. So when my mother, who's sitting right here, clicks to like my Facebook picture, my mother acts as a consumer. She consumes a service offered by Facebook, the ability to like. However, simultaneously, when my mother likes my picture, she is also acting as a producer. Her like produces a unique event on Facebook, a new clickable link. What is of particular interest to me is that in this new dynamic media society, at any given instant, the user of a digitized interaction as commodity acts as both producer and consumer of that interaction. And through consuming, the user is transformed. Through consuming, the user is transformed into a producer. They either produce unique new content from uploading a photo or building a website, or produce new links and connections between existing information by reposting and sharing. And along with any digitized act of consumption, users produce sets of valuable metadata. All this creates new consumable content in the form of clicks and taps. These interactions determine a type of value in society distinct from the economic and cultural values of industrial and post-industrial society. I call this social value. Although it appears that the roles of producer and consumer dissolve into each other, in my research here at DMI, I approach these two roles as separate and clearly defined. And first, I examine the role of the user from the viewpoint of the consumer. Specifically, I was interested in how consumption in dynamic media society informs identity. Consumers of any commodity, shoes, or likes, construct and affirm their identity or self-worth through what they choose to consume. When I click and consume the like my mother has given me on my Facebook profile picture, I receive validation, support, and acceptance, the way owning the right pair of shoes affirms the same. So I began to think about Kim Kardashian. Consider how valuable she feels when she consumes her tens of thousands of little hearts or likes or whatever it may be throughout the day. Her life must be worth something, right? However, how exactly are these likes, texts, clicks, digitized interactions transformed into meaningful data which inform that sense of self-worth? What really is the difference between my 91 Twitter followers? You guys gotta follow me. And Kim's 21 million. This led me to propose the perfect human application as a tool to help us give meaning to our online actions, our email exchanges, our Facebook posts, so that we can better assess our self-worth. Or how else do we know how perfect we are or how perfect we can become? The Perfect Human application is a web and mobile platform which tracks and aggregates all of a user's interactions made on personal computing devices and social media accounts in order to generate real-time statistical information on a user's quantity of interactions, not quality. It works by generating a perfect human score. So the perfect human score is an aggregation of all a user's digitized interactions, tallied in real time, within a 24-hour period. Users receive points for every email sent and received, every post on Instagram, every like on Facebook, every endorsement on LinkedIn, just to name a few. What I really wanted to stress was that these numbers mean very little in isolation. The Perfect Human application offered users a context to understand their numbers by comparing. It's easy to compare a user score to an average user score just through the numbers, as well as through graphical data. So on this day, Giron is very, very perfect. These scores are also given meaning through their calendar interface, as it allows a user to track his or her progress towards perfection over time. They can discover patterns of perfection. As you can see, Giron is significantly more perfect on Friday and Saturday than the rest of the week. Further, they can compare their patterns to those of the average users. Turns out Giron's scores are not just low compared to her weekend, but also to everybody else's as well. Not so perfect anymore. Through this process of scoring, I love you, Giron. The application metaphorically turns the user, our consumer, into a dynamic set of data. The value or worth of this consumer is defined by her quantity of interactions, turning quality as a marker of success and ideal of perfection into a thing of the past. So, this application was inspired by Danish film director Jørgen Leth's short film, The Perfect Human. At the heart of Leth's investigation is not his account of the societal ideals of perfection from the 1960s, not his handsome, smiling, lighthearted protagonist, but rather the protagonist's admittance of confusion. The film climaxes when, during a perfectly pleasant dinner, the female lover of the perfect human suddenly abandons him. The young man's smile fades, and he asks, "Why is fortune so capricious? Why is joy so quickly done? Why did you leave me? Why are you gone?" With the veil of perfection broken, the protagonist reflects on the universal and existential truth that there will always be unknowns, This transforms less investigation from what is the perfect human to what is perfectly human. And the perfect human application comments on this quest. It turns this existential questioning into a number. It speaks directly to its users as consumers. It collects what they do online and transforms those actions into numbers with a knowable purpose, to make them more perfect users and more valuable people. But it does so ironically. By positioning self and number side by side, each score holds the potential for human companionship, a true qualitative experience. But in an attempt to gain followers, likes, and invites, in an attempt to bring meaning to all those interactions, the user focuses only on her own scoring and forgets the human on the other side of the interaction. At its essence, the perfect human is built upon the dichotomy between quantity and quality. The application updates left in an attempt to allow the user to better understand her online actions. The bright colors and bold graphics bring meaning and value quality to the copious amounts of quantifiable information lying in wait for us to consume. But it does so tongue-in-cheek, only to reveal the futility of quantity. No matter what or how much data we scrape, there will never be an algorithm to answer our existential questions. As Les protagonist revealed in 1967, there will always be unknowns. After initial user testing, I determined that users of the perfect human application were put off by all the scoring. In an era when smartphones and new technologies are taking ever more responsibility for the different facets of our lives, why should users have to check an application to retrieve their results? The phone should be doing it for them. In addressing that concern, the Weeping iPhone is a proposed video alert system, like push notifications, to update users if their perfection scores fall too low. For example, if a user's perfect human score drops below the 25th percentile, the phone assumes the user is feeling imperfect, unloved, and worthless, like a loser, and would respond by playing a short video titled Loser Syndrome.
You are dumb. One big, fat, worthless loser. Why do you even bother to open your mouth? Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You are so pathetic. You are probably the biggest, worthless waste of space and disappointment that has ever lived in history of all time. You are nothing but one big, fat loser.
And if scoring stays low for more than 3 consecutive days, the phone would fall into a deep desperation and act as if it were hopeless and depressed. No longer able to function, it would wail for attention in a short notification video called State of Despair. If triggered, these videos play through to completion and impose, to the embarrassment of the phone's owner, an audible outpouring of emotional distress on the surrounding environment. These videos call attention to a new and distinct language of interactivity. Clickable commodities offered to us by Apple in the form of the intrusive push notification or the X in the bubble. We have blindly accepted these commodities and continually consume them. Further, by combining Apple's vocabulary of iconography with the addition of human expression, these videos, that's Fish's son. These videos conflate the expected roles of man and machine. They attempt to turn the perfect and qualitative expression of human emotion into the function of a designed affordance. While the normally cold or unemotive technology expresses emotional vulnerability, the consumer is forced to wait as the video finishes playing. She is transformed into the unfeeling one, the cold and heartless machine. So there's one last point to make. Watching an iPhone cry is funny. It's funny because it doesn't really make sense. Why would an iPhone be able to express such intimate emotions when we have such a difficult time doing so ourselves? But it's also funny because to see such a display of vulnerability in public. So if it is, as it is so socially unacceptable, totally unperfect to rant and cry in public, doesn't it almost make sense to give this expression over to something else, like our phones or a machine? Well, the perfect human application looked at consumption in a dynamic media society and how it can form a sense of self-worth, creating a valuable identity. The weeping iPhone is a reflection on the repercussions of such consumption, how these digitized interactions can perhaps express what tattered shoes do so well, the burden of imperfection. So next, I switch my perspective to examine user as producer. Ingrained in the term producer is a sense of empowerment, a sense that all our interactions together become a powerful and authoring force in forming value in society. Take, for example, Uber, the smartphone-based car-for-hire service, which relies on user-generated input to determine the cost of a cab ride. Or Netflix, which analyzed user data to create its hit House of Cards. Or companies like Cambridge-based startup Ditto, which uses state-of-the-art photo analytics software to listen, I quote, to social media in order to aid in brand management for its clients. All of these companies rely on user-generated input to determine the worth of a commodity or service. So on one hand, the social network becomes a determining force of value in society, whether it be the economic worth of a cab ride, the cultural commodity House of Cards, or the influence of a picture on a shared social network. However, there is another way to understand this situation. As producers, our digitized interactions result in the accumulation of massive quantities of data, a 24/7, tirelessly changing deluge of numbers. But through advancements in computer science, with applied algorithmic models, This is the infrastructure of algorithmic reproduction. User-produced data reproduced by algorithmic systems to structure meaning, authority, and value in society. Whether acting as producer or consumer, our clicks are constantly being reproduced as digitized records, turning all of us users into reproducers. Beyond our browser windows, companies and government agencies know when, where, and how their services are being used. And through this algorithmic infrastructure of data balance, these actions are transformed into valuable information. So consider Uber again. According to Andrew McDonald, Uber's regional manager, we trust the way the data and our algorithm work right now, which is that the multiple increases until the point where there is a supply and demand equilibrium. So it isn't really the user who determines the price of that car ride, or all of the users, but rather how user interactions are translated by this algorithm. Or consider Netflix again. According to Adam Steinberg's recent New York Times article on House of Cards, Netflix knows a lot about what you watch, not just generally, but in a granular, data-driven clicks and duration of viewing time way, and how all of this might translate into what people want to watch next. The key here is that Netflix, by tracking our data, transforms our role as producer into reproducer, and through its specialized algorithms, knows how to transform all of our digitized interactions to serve the success of the company. And Ditto, which simply repurposes our innocent social media shares, and those are real Twitter handles in real time that they publish on their site, in order to serve the needs of their clients. So we could frame this as a problem of free labor. As users, we willingly produce data in service of these companies without any compensation. Or we could examine the serious threat to our privacy and freedom posed by this infrastructure of data balance, which often makes texting feel a bit like undressing in public. But because of UVic, I asked a different question. In the face of the infrastructure of algorithmic reproduction, is it possible to see the reproducer as a willing and therefore empowered member of dynamic media society? Not only did UVic appear to magically overthrow and subvert digital security infrastructures, but this message, his message of personal agency and choice, appeared to rise above the concerns of our particular era. I wanted to apply this message, a message of choice, specifically to the question of the reproducer. So for the following projects, I teamed up with UVic. iTones, the first piece UVic and I worked on together, is an interactive gallery piece that transforms a user and his smartphone into a musical instrument. It is an update of Christoph Fedichko's personal instrument from 1969. The Christoph's wearable artwork addresses the facade of freedom of speech in the state socialism of Poland during the 60s. In his piece, the sound of public space becomes the contested ground where citizens and government metaphorically negotiate freedom. Fedichko's instrument is his first in a series of public interventions that aim to define the situation of the individual as a citizen in a dominated public space, a space dominated by a repressive Polish state. The bizarre costume consisted of a microphone, headphones, and a special set of gloves. The microphones would capture the sound of the public space, and these sounds, through these light sensors in the gloves, were then manipulated, and the sounds would play back, these transformed sounds, in the private space of the user's headphones. The instrument allowed its wearer to alter the ambient sounds of public space, in turn empowering the dominated citizen. As Fedichko explained, and though I do not have the right to say what I really want to say, let me at least be allowed to listen to what I want to hear. The piece is an articulation of the power dynamics between a repressive socio-political situation and the citizen. And today, in the face of restructuring algorithms in our dynamic media society, the reproducer can find him or herself in a situation of similar duress. So Fedichko used the ambient sounds of public space to articulate the situation of a citizen silenced by a repressive state. His instrument doesn't give the citizen a voice, but empowers him as a conductor of his own silence. Through iTones, UVic and I used the pre-selected sound of a user's personal smartphone ringtone to articulate an updated power struggle. The power struggle between the reproducer and the algorithm who is continually repurposing the data we produce. And though iTones doesn't offer the user control over his data, it doesn't allow him to repurpose his it does allow him to repurpose his ringtone, at least in the name of art. So in the gallery, a user is confronted with a minimal setup. A simple black set of earphones hanging on the wall next to a repurposed armband. A drawing done directly on the gallery wall and labeled iTones demonstrates how the piece is worn. The user is required to use his own personal smartphone, which he inserts in the wristband and plugs into the earphones. At the moment of plugging in, the user initiates codes on a hidden chip in the headphones, which discovers the pre-selected sound set on his personal phone. While wearing the costume, the user becomes an instrument capable of distorting the familiar sounds of his personal ringtone, transforming them with practice into music. So each piece offers a glimmer of hope in the form of musical beauty. The goal isn't to overthrow the algorithm, but just articulate a power struggle between two agent yet unequal components. By using the instrument, the user becomes aware that there is no innocent like or post. Ultimately, they have to take the costume off. The agency we feel when we navigate our digital interfaces is an illusion. Whether we consume or produce, we are always transformed into the reproducer. As iTone portrays the situation of the reproducer as an agent yet unequal force in structuring value in dynamic media society, with I here, Ubik and I wanted to do more than just define the situation. We wanted to offer a bit more hope. I here is an interactive instrument designed for the gallery that uses the artifact of a cell phone ringtone to represent our technological infrastructure. The user plays the instrument like a theremin, manipulating the frequency of 4 unidentifiable tones. Only through sustained interaction do the notes resolve into 4 familiar cell phone ringtones. That piece is up in Butler and Payne, if anyone wants to go check it out. Like Ubik soundings, I hear strips the ringtones from their trigger and presents them in a new context. No longer are these ringtones heard as nagging or annoying intrusions. I hear encourages users to listen to these iconic sounds differently, as melodies, as music, as sounds with which they might even compose and harmonize. Yet looking beyond its metaphorical ideals, the instrument confirms that we as humans have a powerful ability to listen. We can find joy and beauty in the world around us. And in this regard, I hear acts as a prompt to empower its users. Roles of consumers and producers set aside, to spend a few moments offering joy, humor, and beauty where it is least expected. To conclude the day. My thesis addresses how our personal dynamic technologies, from laptops and smartphones to email and social media accounts, structure value in the world. It puts the digitized interaction as engagements with our technologies at the center of this investigation. And it frames the world we live in as a dynamic media society. In this society, I have defined a relationship between the reproducer and a dynamic infrastructure of data balance. Within this relationship, the two components negotiate authorship of value and meaning. This struggle becomes evident in our evolving sense of identity or self-worth, redefining concepts of privacy, labor, and leisure, all ample avenues of research. Yet for UBIC, it is all a matter of perspective. And similarly, I've addressed the effects of new technologies from the perspective of both the consumer and producer. My work has led me to examine digitized interactions from the viewpoint of a consumer. The user becomes the stand-in for Jorgen Left's perfect human, navigating the philosophical questions of existence and identity in a new context, with affordances offered by new technologies. The perfect human application and the weeping iPhone reflect on the consumer as she negotiates the fused boundary between the quantifiable machine of new media and the qualifiable man and woman. From the standpoint of the producer, the interfaces of dynamic media offer affordances for value creation, redefining the meaning of and value of digitized interactions. iTones and iHear ask if, despite algorithmic reproduction, one which transforms our digitized interaction into servants of global capitalism, one which is redefining our understanding of privacy, can we not remember our innate ability to find and author meaning in the world where it is least expected, with a cell phone ringtone? As I reflect on my investigation into value and my work with UBIC, I am left with a few questions. I realize that the interactive experiences I have designed have helped me refine my ideas, create a framework for which to consider how society is changing and the actors within it. But what does this experience as a metaphor do for others? How we choose to bring meaning and value to our data is a complex process, informed by our personal choices, the algorithmic structures which we design and author, as well as by the political, cultural, social, and economic ideologies of society. But do our new technologies and the three-pronged role of the user as consumer, producer, and reproducer distinguish this power struggle from those of the past? In what ways? And if we see this power struggle as unique, what affordances does dynamic media society offer us as reproducers, with which we can reclaim agency, or as Vadichko would call it, the ideals of democracy? Or are we better off examining UBIC's message through a more timeless lens, where his message is fundamentally one of hope, despite being dressed up in the ominous and reflective black casing of iHear? No doubt the box is reflective for a good reason, to remind us that it is all a matter of personal perspective. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. I guess I struggled a little bit. I had a hard time with some of the, particularly in the early part of the presentation, kind of keeping up with the subject matter, and it may be my shortcoming. There were a lot of long words, and I think I struggled in terms of how digestible the subject matter was. I think we could, that needs work in terms of just distilling this down into kind of getting to the point and really staying away from the complex language and just getting more direct about. I think it makes it a little challenging to provide feedback here, but maybe I can ask you to just try to distill down what your key findings were, like all the time you spent and all the work you did. What's your takeaway in real, without getting into the technical words, just in real plain English?
I'd be happy to. I'm sorry if it wasn't, that is not your shortcoming by any means. I think that these concepts are really abstract, so it's been a real challenge and a goal of mine to make it digestible. So to make it really simple, what I asked at the beginning was, what is dynamic media, or what is constant connectivity? What are these new technologies? How are they changing the world that we live in? And I sort of ended up in a place where I was asking, very specifically, what does it mean when we use these things? And we don't use them innocently because of all this software, this data balance. They get reused in an alternative way without really our control. And how does that change things at the end of the day?
How do you think it changes?
Well, I think it restructures value, and I think it restructures a very abstract sense of value, ideologies. But I also think in a real way it changes the price of a car ride in Uber. It changes real practical things too that we can feel. It's not just about the experience of seeing that dress that I was looking at on BCBG pop up in my email. It's not just that, it's more than that. So that's what I was trying to get at with all my terminology. And I hope that the pieces that I created would sort of be able to relay some of that abstract or the complexity of what I was getting across in a more simple way.
First of all, congratulations on being so cool after marinating in expectation.
Oh, that's such a compliment. Everyone did so well.
7 hours preparing what you were about to do with whatever you're doing. So nicely done. I look for some Marxist dialectic criticism, but I think Christopher here. I think the idea, just to go on your Marxist theory model, that the reason why corporate power likes us to be reproducers is because in this environment where every act of consumption is an unpaid act of production, value lies in network effects. So if you can get multiplication for free, as well as creation for free, you got it made. I thought that the first couple of projects, the Perfect Human and the Weeping iPhone, were really nice ways of making visible things that are invisible because they're ubiquitous. Like Facebook's, yeah, it's kind of like maybe make a connection between Facebook and the line, I think, from The Exorcist. Satan's greatest accomplishment is having people not believe in him. So you've kind of shown wickedness that we don't even notice. And if you could just keep your tongue out of your cheek, there might be a double Facebook for you. It's already and then just the second last couple projects, iZones and iHear. Interestingly disturbing, especially iHear. I didn't get a sense of so much plausible emotion out of the Weeping iPhone, but I heard distress in the distortions of the iHear thing. That there was actually, this thing went from being ubiquitous, invisible, nobody designed this, to being something that somebody made that had uniqueness in this moment, and then like hugely anxious, anxiety. Yeah.
You forgot to credit you, Rick. In your thank you.
You're very right.
I have a personal short comment. I'd like to congratulate you. It's been a great pleasure to see you reach certain level of scholarship, which results in my suggestion, modest suggestion, that you should continue your academic
the pressure's really thin on mine. I mean, anyone who's worked with young can't really say. Someone in here hated something.
Thank you very much. On behalf of DMI faculty and guests and everyone else, I would like to thank you class 2014. That's great, gentlemen. Unfortunately, I have the bad news that I cannot open my house today for festivities for some reason. But if you have a plan to continue the scholarship in our field office in England, somewhere else, first round of drinks on me.
I don't think I
Yeah.
You were so blissed out, you missed it.
Hey, turn off.
Yeah, I know.
But that's true. You did a really good job. Wait, really? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she would, and you know what else? I haven't read.
Thank you so much.
So hard.
Thank you.
Your attention, please. Last but not least, congratulations on the completion of all the requirements.
From all of the non-graduating students to the graduating students, we thought that you guys deserved a cupcake.
We have to sign the books, okay? Yeah, I would like to. I would like to have 2 more minutes of your attention. Just one more minute. 1 more minute. We would like to